Welcome to the deep dive. This week, we're looking at something really dynamic happening in global tech. I mean, if you follow artificial intelligence, you know it moves incredibly fast. But our sources this week, they're suggesting September 2025 wasn't just, another month for AI in Africa. It felt like, well, like an inflection point. A real shift, it seems, away from mainly consuming tech made elsewhere toward Africa actively creating and really shaping its own digital future. Okay, let's unpack this a little. We're seeing this fascinating, almost paradoxical situation in the source material. On one hand, there's this huge ambition backed by some serious private money and maturing policy, but then that ambition is running right up against a, frankly, surprising lack of global funding, a market that looks poised for massive growth, but it's still kind of struggling to get the world's VCs to pay attention. So our mission today is to pull apart these threads. We'll look at three main currents defining this moment: the big push for a sovereign AI stack, how fast the policy frameworks are evolving, and the tricky investment scene.
Right. And that idea of sovereignty, that's really the bedrock here. It's the theme tying all our sources together. Africa is making a very conscious effort towards technological independence. It's about trying to avoid what's often called digital colonialism, the risk of just always depending on outside tech giants for the basic tools, the compute power, the language models.
And it's not just talk, is it? It's being built.
Exactly. It's concrete. There are two main pillars making up this sovereign AI stack strategy. First up, the absolute essential ingredient, the hardware, the compute power.
And the scale here is, well, it's pretty staggering. We're talking about Strive Masiyiwa's plan, the Zimbabwean billionaire.
That's the one. Masiyiwa, through his companies, is spearheading a, get this, $720 million private project to build 5 Pan-African AI factories. These are basically high-performance data centers. The goal, to get 15,000 top-of-the-line NVIDIA GPUs up and running by late 2026.
15,000. And where are these going?
They're spreading the capacity across key hubs: South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, Egypt, and Morocco.
Okay, 15,000 GPUs. That sounds like a lot, but you need to put that in context, right? What problem does that number actually solve?
It heckles the core deficit. Right now, the entire continent of Africa has maybe 1% of the world's AI computing capacity. Just 1%.
Wow. Only 1%.
It's staggering, isn't it? So Masiyiwa's plan is a direct, very substantial move against that. It's a clear attempt to shift the continent from just being a passive buyer of cloud services to actually producing and owning its own compute power, which, should democratize access and hopefully spark more local innovation.
Okay, so that's the muscle, the hardware. But that compute power is just like an expensive set of boxes without the right data and models that actually understand the local context. So the second pillar has to be the software, right?
Exactly. And that leads us straight to Nigeria's NATLA's project. That stands for the Nigerian Atlas for Languages and AI at Scale. This really embodies that commitment to self-determination in data. It's an open source project focused on building a multilingual large language model.
And why is that focus on language specifically so critical? It seems obvious, but maybe unpack that.
Well, think about it. The whole generative AI boom is built on language. If the models are mostly trained on, say, English or maybe French, using global data sets, they just won't work well for Africa's specific needs. NATLA aims to digitize and build AI capabilities for Nigeria's over 500 languages. Imagine that. It preserves that incredible linguistic diversity, but it also ensures the AI being built is culturally relevant.
Makes sense.
And crucially, MTN Group, the big telecom player, has already pledged support. That's a big signal. It shows major companies see the economic need for these indigenous language models.
So Masiyiwa builds the engine, NATLA provides the sort of operating system and the data structure. That covers the tech side of sovereignty. But policy has to keep pace, doesn't it, to manage this new power? And our sources show things are moving fast on that front, too.
Yeah, they really are. The policy side isn't just reacting, it's developing alongside the tech, which is actually a key sign of maturity. We saw the African Union formally adopt its continental AI strategy. That sets the overarching philosophy.
And that philosophy feels quite different from, say, Silicon Valley or maybe even Europe. It's framed as Africa-owned, people-centered, development-oriented, and inclusive.
Exactly. The main focus isn't just commercial competition or defensive regulation, although that's part of it. It's more about developmental utility. How can AI solve the big challenges? Things like health, education, agriculture.
And this AU vision, this top-down strategy, it's actually translating into concrete national plans now. It's not just staying theoretical.
No, it's moving. Look at Kenya. They've rolled out a detailed national AI strategy for 2025 to 2030, and it specifically targets using AI to improve healthcare and boost farming yields to absolutely critical areas. Or take Ghana. They've announced they're drafting an emerging technologies bill. That's a wider legal net covering AI, but also robotics and blockchain. They're trying to lay down clear rules before the tech goes completely mainstream.
And it seems like Africa isn't just talking amongst itself. The sources show efforts to connect globally, too. That G20 AI for Africa initiative alignment, for example.
Right. And also the launch of the African Hub for AI Safety, Security, and Peace at the University of Cape Town. That's got support from the UK and Canada. It really underlines that African experts are actively shaping the global safety conversation from their perspective, not just waiting for others to set the agenda.
Okay, so this sounds almost perfect. You've got massive private investment coming in, you've got the cultural data infrastructure being built with NATLAs, and you have clear policy direction from the AU down to national plans. But here's where things get complicated, and maybe why that people-centered goal might be harder to achieve than it sounds.
Ah, yes. What's really fascinating here is the gap. A pretty stark disconnect between the policymakers, the tech builders, and the general public. You have policy racing ahead, but public awareness. It's lagging way behind.
What were those numbers from South Africa? That was the specific case study mentioned, wasn't it?
Yeah, the findings pointed to a huge awareness deficit. Something like 73% of people there barely even register the term AI.
73%.
Yeah. It broke down to about 37% who'd never heard of it at all, and another 36% who knew very little. And remember, South Africa is one of the continent's most advanced economies technologically, so those numbers, they really jump out.
Yeah, it feels like a major communication breakdown, right when adoption needs to be taking off.
It is, and the implications are pretty serious. This gap risks creating what you might call governance by the few. If only a small elite, the founders, the policymakers, the academics, really understands the tech, the strategy, the risks, well, that fundamentally undermines the AU's goal of being people-centered, doesn't it? If the public doesn't grasp the potential benefits or the possible downsides, you create barriers to adoption, and crucially, you risk a massive lack of public trust down the line.
Right. And that friction, that trust deficit, could slow everything down no matter how many GPUs Masiwa plugs in. Okay, let's pivot to the money side, because this is where the paradox really bites. We have to square the huge potential with the current financial reality.
Yeah, this is where the numbers almost seem to contradict each other. On paper, looking long-term, the outlook is incredibly positive. The African AI market, valued at about $4.5 billion in 2025.
Okay.
And it's projected to skyrocket to $16.5 billion by 2030. That's strong, multi-year, triple-digit growth potential. We also see the Big Four, South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, Egypt attracting the lion's share, about 86% of the investment. So clear regional hubs are forming.
That sounds great. A booming market in the making. But then you zoom out and look at the global venture capital picture. And suddenly it looks quite different, almost alarming. Our sources showed that in Q2 2025, global AI startups raised a massive $47.3 billion. Huge number. Yet, African AI startups, they captured a mere 0.02% of that global pot. That worked out to just $14 million in one quarter. Across the whole continent, 0.02%. That tiny figure is the core challenge. It highlights the gap between the promise and the actual investment flowing in right now. So the market's heading towards $16.5 billion in just 5 years. Why the hesitation from global VCs? What's causing this huge disconnect in the short term? Are they waiting for Masiwa's AI factories to actually exist, or is it something deeper?
It's likely a mix, but I think it's fundamentally structural. Look, VC investors tend to be risk-averse, right? They like scale and speed. First, many African AI solutions are tackling very specific, local, high-impact problems, think climate-smart farming or healthcare for areas with little infrastructure. These often take longer to reach massive scale and profitability compared to, say, enterprise software in the U.S.
Okay, longer time horizons.
Second, even with new policies emerging, there's still some regulatory uncertainty. Investors want to see these frameworks actually tested in practice. And third, yeah, they probably are waiting for that underlying compute infrastructure to become more stable and accessible. You can't easily build a huge LLM company without reliable access to those thousands of GPUs. But this scarcity, this funding gap, it's forcing the ecosystem to get creative. And it seems to be adapting quite well, particularly through something called blended finance.
Okay, let's define that for listeners. Blended finance sounds important, maybe even the secret sauce for getting these crucial but maybe slower burn projects off the ground.
Essentially, blended finance mixes commercial investment capital, the kind that expects a market return, with philanthropic funds, or government grants, or other forms of catalytic or non-dilutive capital.
Non-dilutive meaning money that doesn't demand equity or a quick payback.
Exactly. That softer money helps to de-risk the overall investment. It makes a deal that might look too risky or take too long for a purely commercial investor suddenly seem attractive. We saw a perfect example with Mazao Hub, that agritech startup in Tanzania. They raised a $2 million pre-seed round, but it was a blend. $1.5 million was standard equity investment,
Okay.
but it was combined with $500,000 in non-dilutive capital. That $500,000 signals confidence and helps cover the longer research and development runway you often need for deep tech and agriculture. It cushions the risk for the equity guys.
But the sources were clear that traditional VC isn't completely gone, right? It's still playing a role, especially in sectors that look more like established global markets.
Oh, absolutely. Take Credete, a fintech firm in Nigeria working on credit infrastructure. They raised a pretty substantial $22 million Series A round. Fintech generally has clearer paths to making money and often operates within more established regulatory lines, so it remains a big draw for traditional VC. It shows the funding gap isn't uniform. It's often worse for those deep tech or impact-first ventures.
And we're also seeing corporations stepping in with grant programs to fill that very early stage gap. Naspers and Prosus, for instance, with their Tech Founder Africa Challenge.
Yeah, offering $100,000 in equity-free grants specifically for women-led tech startups. That's not just charity, it's catalytic. It's designed to help founders get past that initial hurdle, prove their concept, and become more attractive for later investment.
Okay, we've covered the money structures. Let's shift now to how this all plays out on the ground. Practical solutions, talent development, starting with East Africa.
Right, East Africa, especially Kenya, seems to be really buzzing as a hub for cultivating talent. And we actually have some hard data on what works for closing the skills gap, thanks to the Zindi country-level employability report for 2025. The key takeaway was incredibly specific and practical. It found that completing 4 or more AI challenges on Zindi's platform, which is like a Kaggle for Africa, made a user 4 times more likely to land a job.
4 times more likely just from doing challenges.
Yes. And collaborating with others on those challenges tripled a user's job prospects.
That's amazing. It's a measurable, repeatable model.
Yeah.
It moves away from just focusing on academic credentials towards demonstrating actual problem-solving skills. That's exactly what a fast-growing ecosystem needs, isn't it?
It connects learning directly to getting hired. And you see this practical, agile approach reflected in how companies deploy their tech, too. Let's go back to Mazao Hub in Tanzania. Their solution is a great example of what some call tech and touch. They use low-cost soil sensors, an AI platform that can work offline,
Which deals directly with patchy internet connectivity. But what about the touch part, the human element? Why is that so crucial?
because in many rural farming communities, the barrier isn't just lack of connectivity, it's often a lack of trust in new technology. So Mazao Hub pairs its tech with physical farmer excellence centers. These centers are staffed by trained agronomists, people the community knows and trusts. They help translate the AI's insights into practical, local advice. It's a hybrid model. It tackles skepticism and digital literacy head-on.
So adoption moves at the speed of trust, not just technology.
Precisely. That human-centered design might actually be a key differentiator for AI development in Africa compared to elsewhere. And nowhere is that agility more critical than in healthcare, where AI can genuinely be a force multiplier when resources are tight.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Well, AI isn't replacing doctors, not at all. It's extending their capabilities. Take diagnostics. We're seeing AI-powered tools like CAD4TB, computer-aided detection for tuberculosis. These are being used in mobile X-ray vans that go out to high-risk communities in places like South Africa and Kenya.
And what does the AI actually do?
It helps analyze the X-rays. The key thing is, it allows health workers who aren't specialist radiologists to conduct initial TB screenings with pretty high accuracy. This speeds up diagnosis and gets people into treatment faster, especially in areas with few specialists. It lowers the barrier to getting essential care.
That makes a huge difference.
And then there's logistics. Zipline is the famous example here. Using AI-optimized drone networks in Rwanda and Ghana, they deliver critical medical supplies, blood, vaccines, medicines. The AI plans the most efficient flight paths and delivery schedules, slashing delivery times to remote clinics that were previously hard to reach quickly.
These are clearly life-saving uses of AI. But the sources also bring us back to earth a bit, noting that actually rolling these things out widely often hits snags. Not because the tech fails, but because the underlying systems aren't ready.
That's right. The AI itself might be ready, but the foundations can be shaky. Deployment often gets stuck because of things like the lack of interoperable electronic health records. The different systems just don't talk to each other smoothly.
Right.
And you also need clear, consistent data protection laws across different regions. So the political will, the bureaucratic systems, they need to catch up with the potential of the technology leap.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, when we put all these pieces together, the ambition, the policy, the funding paradox, the practical applications, what's the big picture? What does this moment of inflection really mean for AI in Africa?
Well, you clearly see this determined two-sided push for technological sovereignty. It's defined by, on one hand, serious private investment like Masiyiwa's $720 million plan.
And sophisticated policy emerging, like the AU strategy and national blueprints.
Exactly. But that huge ambition is constantly bumping up against the, let's be honest, the harsh reality of that global funding gap, that tiny 0.02% share, and the existing infrastructure limits, like only having 1% of the world's compute.
So the goal is independence, but the journey is definitely constrained by global money flows and current capacity.
I think the key takeaway, the real opportunity here long term, isn't necessarily about trying to copy Western AI models. It's about using this moment to leapfrog legacy systems entirely and really focusing on developing homegrown solutions. AI tailored specifically for unique African challenges, indigenous language models like NATLS, specialized health tools like those TB screeners, and those mobile-first tech-and-touch solutions for farming.
Makes sense. Building for the reality on the ground.
Now, we tend to focus a lot on AI in the formal sectors: finance, advanced healthcare, maybe manufacturing. But reading between the lines of our sources, maybe the most transformative potential for AI in Africa isn't about replacing global systems. Perhaps it's about structuring, supporting, and scaling the huge informal economy. That's where most economic activity actually happens for millions of people. Think about AI assisting smallholder farmers directly, providing reliable credit scoring for the unbanked, optimizing supply chains for small market vendors.
That's a really interesting angle.
So here's a final thought for you, something to maybe chew on. If African innovators really lean into building lightweight, mobile-first AI solutions specifically designed for that massive, dynamic, often cash-based, informal economy, how could that create a fundamentally different kind of competitive advantage for the continent? One that AI developed primarily for the established, formal economies of the West just couldn't replicate?